It's no secret that the whole world is struggling right now with the tumultuous economic scenario, with the governments all over the world trying to tame the inflation juggernaut. But everyone has been asking the same question: are we in a recession yet? Well, to answer this today, we would look at the weirdest and most eccentric sounding economic indicator, the underwear index. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it right, and it's not a joke. The underwear index is one of the most followed and sought after economic indicators to predict the advent of recession, mostly by manufacturing and supply side managers. Although India's innerwear market witnessed a boom in the sales in the first 2 quarters of financial year 23, and that too despite inflation on an upward trend, the sales however dropped by 55% in December 22, clearly reflecting that rising inflation had been eating into disposable incomes. This in turn resulted in concerns about an economic slowdown that could potentially evolve into a recession, and these concerns almost always are followed by tracking the underwear index. So in today's episode, let's deep dive, analyze and try to understand the intricacies of underwear index, how this index potentially helps in identifying an underlying recession, and what are the pragmatic statistics which could provide credence to this index and its prowess. Chapter 1. All the fuss over an underwear. Alright, so first off, where did the underwear index come from and what it is all about? The underwear index theory was presented forth by former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, originally during the 1970s, and according to his theory, although underwear is considered a necessity, but when the economic anxiety is creeping up, men will not replace the pairs that are already in their drawer, causing the underwear sales to dip and price inflation to ease. Let's understand this with the help of an intricate explainer, shall we? Let's say the average price of a pair of men's underwear is 100 rupees during a stable economic period. The man in India specially consider themselves the family carriers who want to keep their family's needs met on the expense of their own. So they think that since underwear is the most private garment, they won't be on display to anyone. Hence, cutting back on underwear shopping is the first step towards cutting costs. Owing to this thinking, the underwear sales start dipping, and as a result, the companies start reducing the price of men's underwear, because of which it now sits at 70 rupees, indicating that consumers are cutting back on discretionary or non-essential spending due to a potential economic downturn. So now if this trend continues and men keep on skipping on buying new underwear, retailers may be forced to offer even steeper discounts to entice them to purchase their products, leading to decreased profits and eventually leading to a recession. This is because the purchase of men's underwear is considered a discretionary or a non-essential expense, and as we discussed earlier, is often one of the first items that men cut back on when they face the financial uncertainty. Alan Greenspan noted that observing sales of men's underwear was a useful indicator of the state of the economy, since the purchase of men's underwear is a good indicator of consumer spending, which makes up a significant portion of the economy. Okay, I think we got the hang of underwear index and underwear cost cutting now. But then why would underwear sales dipping and prices dropping lead to a recession? Let's say retailers are offering steeper discounts to entice consumers to purchase underwear, as I mentioned earlier. So the underwear which was retailing for 70 rupees earlier is now retailing for 65 rupees. As a result, the profit margins have shrunk by another 5 rupees, meaning they are making less money per sale, which can in turn have several downstream effects. First, job losses. If retailers' profits continue to decline, they may be forced to lay off workers to cut costs. This can lead to higher unemployment rates as more people are out of work and have less money to spend. Second, reduced spending. As more people are out of work or have less disposable incomes due to lower wages, they may cut back on spending. This can lead to decreased demand for goods and services across multiple sectors of the economy. Third, business closures. If retailers continue to struggle, some may eventually go out of business. This can lead to vacant storefronts, which can harm the local economy and reduce tax revenue for local governments. And fourth, reduced investment. As the economy slows down, investors may become hesitant to invest in new business or ventures. This can lead to reduced innovation and growth in the long term. So in short, all of these factors can contribute to a recession in one way or the other, which is typically defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. So while a decrease in profits for retailers may not directly cause a recession, it can definitely be one of the several contributing factors that might lead to an economic downturn. Chapter 2. All the proof we need. Alright, so people, by now we know what the underwear index means and represents. But the question we need to ask here is that, is there any credibility to this index at all? Does it actually indicate a slowdown in the economy? Let's take the historical data proofs first. In the US, sales of men's underwear fell sharply during the global financial crisis from 2007 to 2009. Then these sales volumes picked up pace again in 2010 as the US economy started recovering. According to Euromonitor, the sales for US men's underwear were $6 billion in 2019, which slumped to $4.5 billion in 2020 when the pandemic hit at full force, bringing in a 25% fall. But then again, as the country started recovering from the pandemic in 2021, the same number was up 22% at $5.5 billion. Coincidence? I think not. Now let's have a look at India-based statistics to corroborate the same. Let's look at this chart here. This chart is a clear evidence of the fact that all these innerwear companies, be it Rupa, Lux or Page Industries, have been significantly underperforming in the Nifty 50. In fact, shares of Rupa and company have slumped by 51%, Lux Industries by 50% and Page Industries by 7%. Thus, an insight from these can be stated that the market has clearly sensed the challenges and pressures being faced by these firms. Taking Page Industries as an example specifically, the company, which has had a huge market cap of more than 42,000 crores and is now India's biggest innerwear firm, was an early mover in the premium innerwear segment with its Jockey brand, which is aspired by millions of people in India now. But despite experiencing significant revenue growth of almost 11% driven by strong post-pandemic demand, the company is now facing a broad-based slowdown in Q3. The company's net profits have grown at a CAGR of 16.1% due to low operating expenses, but the recent decline in volume and high cost inventory have impacted the profitability. Margins have also been affected due to expensive inventory, low absorption of labor and factory overheads. The company's management has reported no improvement in the demand in Q4 and expects demand to normalize only by Q2 2024 at the earliest. Now if we compare this to the Sensex's current condition, where the market is struggling to touch 60,000 time and again, but is falling short, and this coupled with the fact that startups are facing a funding winter while the big firms are laying off its current workforce in order to save cost, it does make a compelling argument that the underwear index is representing a correct picture of India's economic downturn and therefore is all the proof we need for its credibility as an economic indicator. Chapter 3. What brought us here? We established that the underwear index is actually a pretty compelling index to look at our economic situation, which is currently also in a negative state of affairs, going by the current economic scenario. But then, what brings about this change in this index? Is it just simply an inflation-driven phenomenon? What brought us here? Well, you see, the index right now in the current scenario is mainly an output of the pandemic-initiated inflation trifecta. What do we mean by this trifecta exactly? Well, you see, inflation can be broadly categorized into 3 dimensions. The first is the demand pull inflation, where prices rise when demand of goods and services grows faster than the available supply can accommodate. So when the COVID-19 virus waned and the world reopened, the savings-rich consumers released a flood of pent-up demand into a global economy whose supply chains hadn't recovered and thus couldn't keep up, as a result pushing the world in a demand pull inflation. The second kind of inflation is the cost push inflation. When the price of raw material rises, manufacturers pay more to make their products and pass those added expenses onto their buyers, who then pass them on to their consumers. In 2021, wholesale prices rose by nearly 10% owing to these lift in raw material prices, thereby driving the cost push inflation. And then finally, you have the built-in inflation. This is an aftermath of the demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation. Because as these inflation principles reduce the buying power of the households, it triggers a vicious cycle in which the workers demand higher salaries to keep up with these inflation pressures and maintain their lifestyles. Businesses as a result in turn raise their prices to keep up with the increasing labor costs. This is evident by the Great Resignation wave of 2021, in which employers struggling to staff their workers were forced to raise wages to compete, and as a result increasing product prices to give rise to even more inflation. So if we analyze here, these trifecta of economic inflation principles post the pandemic have been the main dividend for the current economic scenario we are in. And this is exactly what the underwear index as an economic indicator tries to warn not just us but the whole world at large. It's just that in most cases, the businesses as well as the analysts who should be wary of the indicators chose to ignore it for being a silly theoretical principle, thereby leading to eventual losses and further slumps. And that was the episode, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked it, do hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel for more such enriching content. I'll see you all in the next episode. Mindfulness signing off.